Hey guys, welcome to Playing with Light, the Passports to Life photography tutorial series. Today we are going to be learning how to add any element, whether it's a person, foreground, clouds even, to a photo seamlessly so that you wouldn't be able to tell that that element wasn't there to begin with. So without further ado, let's head into the tutorial. Okay, so I was talking about on Instagram about how I was pretty low on my backlog of photos, so I found this really nice picture from Prague, but I'd like there to be a human element to it. So I thought, hey, maybe we could make this a tutorial to add me sitting here on the steps of this statue. So I got my green screen out, and we went and shot some photos on my front steps. I put them into Photoshop or Lightroom, I'm sorry, and got it to where the look was just about the same. I just added my Californication preset, and we are going to now take this photo and add me sitting on the steps. So let's check it out. Let's Command E to get into Photoshop. Okay, so we have our background. I always make a copy of the background just in case. Command J or Control J for Windows users. And we are going to also open up this image in Photoshop. Okay, so now we need to make a selection. I kind of like how there's foreground elements here because there is a little bit of a plant here, so we can make it kind of blend there pretty nicely, I think. So okay, so now we're going to make a copy of the background and then select color range. So first you can click on just about anywhere in the background and then click this little add dropper, and then we can continue to click anywhere in here to make sure that the entire background is selected. Okay, so it's not going to be perfect on the first try, but this looks pretty good. And remember, you can change the amount that's selected by messing with the fuzziness here. Once you add a little bit too much, it brings our foreground element that we want to keep and little bits of my shorts into the selection. But that is just okay, because we can make the selection better in a minute. So we're going to create a layer mask with that, and then double click on that, and just take this add brush, and we're going to paint all over the background to get rid of these micro selections. Alright, so we are painting on, and then we want to get rid of the selection that's in here on parts that we want to keep. So we're going to hold down Option and paint over that. Alright, so now if you remember in our last tutorial, we used the Refine Edge brush tool quite a bit, and this is going to be the same. We're going to paint over the edges of our subject, which is me, and make sure that it's right on the line. Okay, so refine the edge down here in our foreground area. I have to zoom in a bit to get this. we're gonna go back to this brush because you can see there's little areas that aren't being selected that we need selected. Get rid of these little guys, and let's zoom out and see if there's any. So you don't need a green screen to do this. You can really do it with any background, but having the green screen or like a white screen, it just makes the selection a little bit easier so that you're doing less of this actually. I'm going to smooth this out and feather it just a bit because we need to. Alright, and now we are going to invert the selection so that our foreground and me are actually the part that's selected. We're going to export it as a new layer with layer mask. Now let's take this and drag it over here. So now I've become a giant, which isn't what we want. So we are going to Command T and hold down Shift, or no, don't hold down Shift. Just make me smaller. Try to line up the steps best we can. Might be helpful to reduce the opacity a little bit. Okay, so this is our starting point. Obviously we're going to end up getting rid of this stair and everything, but it helped for lining everything up. So that can actually be the first thing we take a look at doing. Just get the eraser tool. Make sure your brush is a hard brush. And just erase. We can turn our flow up to 50%. It's actually probably easier to just do this. Go to the layer mask, make sure black is your foreground color, and paint it away. So it's really important when you're doing this to have the hard brush because it makes you much more accurate when you're erasing stuff. You don't get the color bleeding like you do with a soft brush. And it looks like I erased part of the leg here. So we're just gonna go back in, paint it back on. Same with my fingers. That's from using the soft brush before. So this stuff could have been taken care of using the layer mask from on the other photo, but I thought having the steps might actually make this part a little easier. So this is going to take a little while, so I'm going to put this on fast forward and catch up with you after the stairs are gone. Okay, so obviously not looking super yet. our foreground element kind of backfired because it doesn't go all the way over to the edge. So we are going to fix that a separate way a little bit later. But there's a couple things that we want to address. First of all, I am too bright in this image. So we are going, and the sun is coming from the wrong direction, it looks like. So I don't know if we're able to flip this since the foreground is there. So let's take a look. Edit, transform, flip horizontal. Okay, so that. Let's see, just make me a little bit smaller again. Let's see if we can make this work. So now the sun is coming from the proper angle, because that's an important thing that you always want to make sure that you take into consideration. Okay, so scale looks pretty good. Light is coming from the proper direction now, and so now we just have to address the brightness, the colors, and the saturation of everything. So let's start that. Okay, so the first thing, let's address the brightness. The highlights on me are definitely too bright, so we're gonna darken that up a little bit. Probably take the midtones up a little. Okay. So one way that you can check to see how you are doing for brightness is take your dropper tool and find the brightest part of your image, which is probably one of these highlights. Oh, it's probably this. Up here, shift click, and then go to grayscale. And then do the same on the brightest part of the element that you're adding. Still go to grayscale. Okay, so you can see that 22% gray and 15% gray. So we need to darken it just a little. Did a little too much, so bring it back. 22, 23, that's pretty good. And then you do the same exact thing for the darkest part, so you can press shift and then just move it to one of the shadows, and do the same for the other. So you can see that 92%, 97, so our shadows are a little too dark, so we can bring our shadows up just a touch. Oops. A little bit more. There we go. So now we have the brightness matched. Option shift, click on these spots to remove those, and now let's take a look at the saturation. So we are going to add a saturation mask, which we will do by clicking selective color. I made a preset for saturation mask. which puts the black to 0 on every color. Negative 100%, I'm sorry. For whites, it goes up to positive 100%. And same with blacks. So now you can see the parts of your image that are more or less saturated than others. So we'll add a saturation adjustment layer, clip it to our element again, and it's actually looking pretty good compared to our background. So I don't think there's a whole lot to change. We might just desaturate it just a touch, for good measure. I think that looks good. So now we need to check out the luminosity. So we'll turn that off. Yeah, that looks really good. So now let's check out the luminosity. We'll do this by adding a fill layer. New fill layer, solid color. And we can call this luminosity. Click OK, and then we want this to be 50% gray. Change our blend mode to luminosity, and it shows us the parts of the image that are more or less bright. So you can actually add a vibrance layer and pump up the vibrance and saturation to make this a little bit easier. Okay, so again, since I used my preset on this, it doesn't need a whole lot of work, but we can adjust the luminosity with a curves adjustment layer, clip that to our layers below, and I don't want to mess with the skin tones too much, but we can probably take this red down just a little. And since there's a little bit of yellow here, we can take blue down a little bit just to add a little bit more yellow. And you can always unclick these to see how you're doing. So that's a little too desaturated for my liking now, so we're going to go back to the saturation layer and add a little bit of saturation. So there's a lot of just kind of trial and error. It kind of looks a little green to me. So we are going to go into the greens and make sure you have that selected and just bring that down a touch. Okay. So that actually matches pretty well with the whole aesthetic of the photo. So we can get rid of these layers because they were just to help us. And now let's take the copy of the background and make another copy. Add a layer mask. And then we are going to invert it by Command I and just paint on some of this flowery bush stuff. Double click it so we can refine. Oops. Make sure you're on the right brush. That would help. Now we can go to the refine, maybe make sure we get some of these flowers. Missed a couple little spots down here. focus, it's having a little bit of a hard time finding the edges here, but that's alright. So once you have that all selected, looks good. Create a new layer with a layer mask. Just zoom out, and then we are going to do Command T and move it over. Move it on top of the other layer. Come back here. Remove that flower. And we're actually going to want this layer to cover this foot. Let's actually flip it so that we get flowers on both sides. And then we can paint away some of this. And let's add a blur. Blur gallery, field blur. Click on the back, and then on the front, so that's too much blur. Give it a nice light blur. Looks good. We're gonna clean up this just a touch more. Okay, so I mean, that looks pretty good. I wouldn't be able to tell from Instagram size that I was added to that photo, but hey. So, I mean, this isn't perfect. I would have liked better lighting, not quite so harsh lighting for the photo that I took, but you can use this to add foreground elements like we did with this bush here even. To photos, and all of the techniques are exactly the same. You want to make sure that the saturation, luminosity, and tones of everything match, and yeah, that's it. Hey guys, thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I really enjoy making these tutorials. I think next time I'm going to try to do it live so that I can answer questions as we go, so keep an eye out for that. If you would hit the subscribe button, hit the bell next to it so you get notified when I make new videos, and give this video a big thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. It does mean a lot. And also, if you are interested in just throwing out ideas for our next tutorial, shoot them down in the comments below, and maybe we'll make it happen. So thanks, and happy travels.